information, similar information to what I shared and more depth, but it also has the link to the map. If you want to look at where the tier 3 areas are, it has that area where you can put in your address and understand if you might be impacted. And it has the alerts link. So you can go to that and input your information for how do you want to get alerts if a public safety power shutoff may be impacting your area. Okay?
I
So,
have a question.
yes.
It is, what conditions have to happen in order for the power to be cut off?
Yeah, so it's a multi-factor analysis. One of the main parts is the National Weather Service's Fire Index scoring system. So that takes into account humidity, temperature, wind, vegetation conditions, etc., and analyzes all those factors to create basically a score that says how risky is the fire risk today.
Is that a red flag warning?
Red flag warning is one factor, but is not a determining factor by itself. Just because it's a red flag doesn't mean it was going to qualify as that. Hypothetically, we could identify that it's an extreme risk and we might need to take this action without it being red flag, but red flag is an input, not the deciding factor. Red flag generally responds to wind, which is a very important factor, right? Even if it's hot and dry, if there's no wind, the risk, usually can't get that high. So wind is a big factor, and red flag warning is kind of a proxy for wind, but it's not the only factor.
Okay.
So just let me ask one question. So we have a situation, usually in October, where we have a diagonal winds start blowing. It's the driest part of the year. And you have a red flag warning, you have diagonal winds blowing up to 30 to 50 miles an hour over the hill. Then will you make the determination then to cut off the tower?
I mean, I can't run the numbers on the hypothetical.
Yes.
That sounds like a high risk scenario. Sustained winds of 30 miles an hour definitely sounds like something that might trigger the public safety power shutoff. So I can't speak exactly, but October is the peak of fire season in that calculation, and wind is a big factor. So Diablo winds in October is
And we'll be shut off for 5 days.
Yeah, that's what you need to be prepared for, but it's dependent on how long it takes those weather conditions to clear, and then we should assume 24 hours for PG&E to restore after that.
Looking at the data last year, how many days would have been shut off?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've done all this planning, you should know that information.
So no, we haven't done that, and part of the reason we haven't done that is we don't have all the weather inputs that we have now, right?
But you can do some approximations. I mean, to me, this is completely irresponsible that you have this planning and you don't know how long it will be cut off. You could just use last year's data with some approximations. I mean, I could do it. I'm a scientist. I know how to do that.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that we could do it with last year's data with some approximations, but that would not be relevant to every situation we're going to experience this year. That might give us an average duration for the ones we've experienced, and our 2 to 5 day forecast is informed by that information. So we don't have a precise average that they would usually be 2.75 days long, but 2 to 5 days, is what you should assume.
I have some questions.
Here's a question. What about power to the city's emergency siren alert systems?
Yeah, so if public safety power shutoff has to be executed, then it would deactivate power to everything that's relying on that.
That's brilliant.
We don't have,
Water, toilets.
I don't have details on the city's siren system, but we're engaging. We've met with the city of Oakland, we've met with the city of Berkeley. We're engaged with all those, so everyone can be making their plans, whether those plans include batteries, whether those plans include backup generation. So that's the answer to that is, yeah.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what this is. It says, will SCADA be rolled?
SCADA.
SCADA be rolled out to all areas under the hardening process to automate off and on.
Yeah.
So what is?
Yeah, SCADA means supervisory control and data acquisition. So SCADA is the acronym. What it means is remote control of assets. So I mentioned reclosers earlier. If we have remote control of a recloser, it means we have SCADA. So SCADA equals remote control. Yes, a lot of the assets that we don't have remote control for, we don't have SCADA, we are upgrading to have the SCADA remote control capability. All of the new assets that we put in, reclosers, circuit breakers, have SCADA remote control ability. So it is part of our long-term system hardening, but some of our assets have been out there for a while and don't have that yet. They'll be upgraded when we get to them, but not necessarily immediately.
Okay, if we have a generator system or solar power battery backup systems, will they be required by law or otherwise to turn off those systems when the neighborhood has a declared electricity blackout?
No. We need to make sure that generators as well as solar panels are installed correctly and tied into the circuit, your panel appropriately. So always, use a qualified electrician, hire an electrician to tie that into your system. Generators can operate. So if we do a public safety power shutoff, that will deactivate up to the electric meter. If the generator is tied into your circuit panel, to your breakers, you can turn on your generator and that would be fine. It wouldn't backflow onto our system and it wouldn't, otherwise impede. Solar systems, almost all regular installed solar systems are different in that they are tied into our meter. So if our meter, the PG&E meter, turns off, which it would in a public safety power shutoff, you will not get electricity from your solar panels. That is how almost all of them are designed. Not necessarily all of them, but that's the way almost all of them are tied in. If you have questions about that or you're not certain yours works that way, you should talk to your solar provider because it's possible yours is different, but that's the very bulk majority of them.
Where does the power go then from your solar system? If you don't have battery storage, where does the...
It goes to ground.
Okay, how will PG&E coordinate these outages with emergency services, the police and fire, and East Bay Mud?
Yeah, so we've been talking to all those folks to get them thinking about these same things, right? How will they run their systems? How will they communicate with their staffs? How will they operate? So we've already met with the city, with the fire departments, with East Bay Mud, et cetera, so that they can be thinking and making their plans for these as well. When we start to forecast one of these, at least 48 hours in advance, is when we'll start to contact them to let them know what we're seeing, what that might mean, that they need to start activating their plans, et cetera.
So I assume all traffic lights and everything else is gonna go down, is that right?
It is
Everything's going down.
based on...
Water, your toilets, nothing. So if you had a spark, you can't use water. Water takes pumps.
No, it's downhill feed,
It dep-
gravity feed.
Yeah, so I can't speak to how the water works in your neighborhood or in Oakland, but yes, the power will be off for 2 to 5 days. Some communities have batteries on the lights, as in traffic lights. They won't last 2 to 5 days in general. But yes, anything that needs
What about natural
power.
gas? Are you cutting that off?
No, natural gas is not the
Let's put
subject.
that below.
I'd like to know how people who have to keep medication cold do so if the power's out for an extended time. Ice packs only last so long and might not keep the medicine at a right temperature.
Yeah, so this is an important part of your emergency plan. If you need to have medicine that's refrigerated, you need to think about how will you handle that for 2 to 5 days, right? Will you go to a place where you can make that happen? Do you have enough ice packs or a deep freezer or something like that? But yes, this is an important issue. We want people to be thinking about those exact things. What will it impact you if you didn't have power for 5 days, and how can you respond?
Now, do you envision 2,000 people with 100-gallon tanks of gasoline for their generators helping in this situation? You're basically telling me for a week, go away and we'll come back later, but if your house won't work without power, you're on your own? Build a generator, go to the other electric company, or?
I think that we also need to think in terms of an earthquake.
Yeah.
What are we going to do then?
Oh, but that's only once. This is.
Once,
Yeah, but
Howard,
this is-
we're going to be on our
No,
own
that-
for
And in
weeks.
fact, there's an earthquake. This is in anticipation, potentially, of
With
greater
wind.
fire
You're
danger.
talking about 10, you're talking probably it's
Howard.
gonna be 10 days a week, a month, a year.
All right, there's no way we can answer everything. I would like to wave a magic wand and say, you know, it's gonna be okay. But fact is, I mean, it's gonna be on our shoulders to figure part of this out.
Well, we could put pressure on PG&E to actually manage.
Well, I think you need
outside
to put
plants so it doesn't
pressure-
start fires.
Not just on PG&E, but they're regulated, right? By the CPUC.
Allegedly.
They don't, what response?
So it's, you know, these are not, you know, people that make the laws before you. They're trying to figure it out to,
What is it they're
Make
trying to
it-
figure out would be the question.
they're trying to figure out how, well, like Santa Rosa. You know, when the power lines came down, they started to have a
The
fire.
power line started the fire.
Well, I assume a lot of this is being done to mitigate your liability, correct?
Yes, that's the reason. It's liability.
So I have a question. So
Okay,
on-
Steve has a question.
Yeah, so under what legal authority are you using to do this? I'm just curious. So is it CPUC that's enabling you, or is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain that.
So San Diego Gas and Electric, also regulated by the CPUC, has been doing this for 10 years, right? So they have been activating proactive power shutoffs for a while. In the previous to this, the CPUC had issued direction that we, the utility companies, should exercise our best discretion at how to operate our system to mitigate for safety risks. In the last month, they passed a resolution that said utilities need to have a plan for how to deactivate power in cases of extreme conditions. So yes, other utilities in California have been doing it. The CPUC said we already had the ability to do that. And then just of late, they've said, you need to do this. You need to have a plan for it. So yes, we're operating under the direction and the guidance of the CPUC.
So you said that San Diego does it, maybe we'll all feel better. Do you know anything about how it's working with them, how much they've gotten and what are people doing so that since we're not gonna be the first, so we're not the guinea pigs?
Yeah, you're not the first, you're not the guinea pigs. We've been benchmarking with San Diego extensively on how they do it and how their communication protocols work and that kind of stuff. So we've learned a lot from what they do. We've also benchmarked, it's a little bit different scenario, but with East Coast utilities that do this when hurricanes are coming, right? That's usually connected to evacuation order, which is a little different, but we've benchmarked and connected with all those folks to learn their lessons about how do you communicate to people, what do you do, et cetera.
Do you know if San Diego's had a lot of these outages in the last year
San
or so?
Francisco Chronicle did an article on it.
I don't know exactly how many San Diego has done. I believe I heard they did one in like December of last year because the conditions were still so rough in December, which is highly unusual. So they've done them. They're actively, as necessary, doing them, and we're learning from that, copying some of their practices.
Because Ken, I think we had a conversation about this, that last year San Diego had 11 deaths.
There's no planning.
San Diego Gas and Electric implemented this after the 2005 Cedar fire. And they have over 1,000 remote weather sensing stations. They have a camera on every pole, and they have long ago started to harden their assets. And even if you're out in Borrego Springs in the middle of nowhere, your wood pole's going away and it's being replaced by a I don't need that.
You do, actually, for the camera.
Oh, I guess I do. They're going to be replaced by a hardened pole. They've already gone SCADA almost everywhere. So that they don't have to wait 5 days. This is why I asked the question about SCADA. 2 to 5 days. Think about it. How long will the weather event last? Then we got to go out and manually in some of these places turn it back on as opposed to automatically sending a signal that restarts stuff. So, please, patience is a virtue.
Okay, just,
So,
San
no, I
Francisco
just need to
Chronicle
clarify.
article said everybody installed gasoline generators in their house. If you think stacks of gasoline in your garage is a safety mechanism to overcome the power outage, I'm not going to agree. And
I
that
have
article
relatives
exposed
in
that.
San Diego,
Well, I read the
both
Chronicle.
Eastern County and North County, and no one installed a gas generator. Thank
Talk
you
to a
very much.
Chronicle reporter.
Yes, I
Cited
did
people.
talk to that Chronicle reporter. And there are people, like there are here, that are still arguing about it and still up in arms about it. And I'm not certain we'll ever get 100% on this. But I'm for all lives matters, not just my meat in the freezer and my drugs. Thank you.
Do you know,
Let me do two clarifications. One is that the restoration time, the reason it takes a while is because you need to manually patrol and make sure that there's no trees sitting on lines. San Diego has to do that too, right? So whether or not you've got SCADA control of the switch or the recloser doesn't change the patrol time. So that's the first one. The generator thing, you know, again, that's a personal decision. We're supportive of whatever people want to do. It may or may not be a solution for you. Certainly not everyone in SDG&E's high fire threat zone has a generator, but it can be a solution for the right conditions. Did you have another one, or you want me to?
you mentioned that at some point you're gonna look at, rather than having a big swath that you have to turn down, that you would have more manageable microsystems. How does San Diego manage that? Are they already?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the size of the outage we need to take in the case of extreme wildfire risk and a public safety power shutoff is based on how the circuit is configured. And if there are reclosers or switches or circuit breakers that isolate, you know, sort of smaller parts of the section of the circuit or larger parts of the circuit. That's combined with the weather forecast. So if the weather forecast says one part of the hills is in extreme, we need to shut it off, but the other part is not, then if we have the ability to isolate those two, we will. That may or may not be the case. You know, in the Diablo wind scenario, it's likely the whole area is under sort of the same risk profile, and then it really doesn't matter how much isolation we have. So
I guess what I'm asking is, are you going to progress to upgrade your system to allow you to isolate further and further? So if you have areas that have underground utilities that probably shouldn't be affected, that at some point they won't be because they're not in a danger of a tree falling on a line.
Right. Yes, that's a general goal, is to increase the sectionalization of our system, to have more of those tools to isolate one area versus another. But in the case of public safety power shutoff, it's based on a lot of factors, weather being sort of preeminent.
Yeah, 27 years ago, we knew that PG&E would be for the next wildfire. That's exactly why we got our underground. And we passed a bond in our area, and there's many thousand homes that did that. Why haven't you done any planning in these 27 years so that we could be protecting the wildfire? I mean, this seems outrageous. And I'll have two questions. The other question is, in order to get water in the hills, we get our water pumped up by PG&E, by East Bay Mud. Is East Bay Mud involved? We're going to run out of water.
There is a plan involved where they have generators that are taken to the pumping stations. And is that correct? I have a few PG&E people here.
I mean, East Bay Mud, yeah.
So just let me comment on the East Bay Mud briefly. We recently just met with East Bay Mud. We're collaborating with them on what their plan is when electricity goes out. I agree with you, the pumps won't have electricity. They have generators. We have the potential to get more generators, but most of the system is gravity fed. Already on a red flag day.
Not now, area.
Already on a red flag day, they pre-fill all the reservoirs. So there is a supply of water that'll last a finite period of time. And that's, how long is a PG&E comment that we'll get? We're still working with them to determine all the complete information on that. It's something we've been trying to do over the last few weeks with all of our water supply companies, not only in the Oakland Hills, but throughout our Those are great questions. They're absolutely great questions. We still have a lot of work to do to figure some of these things out. And let me go back. I worked the Oakland Hills fire. The Oakland Hills fire was not started by a power line. How was it started?
You're right, by carelessness.
By carelessness, okay? Most of the fires over the last, since 1923, have been started by carelessness or arson in the Oakland Hills, East Bay, Berkeley area. So with that being said, the message here is to be prepared. Whether it's a fire, an earthquake, an electrical outage, we want you to be prepared. We need to be
Well,
prepared.
we are prepared, but you're telling us that we're gonna be out with power between it's probably gonna be 10 days a year, we're gonna have no power. We're gonna run out of water. We use medical devices to live. We can't do anything. without electricity, we can't do anything. You're saying that the hills will be inhabitable for 10 days a year.
Earthquake will be out for
What?
months.
So maybe part of your plan is if we have an outage that you leave the area and go someplace
We
where
don't
you
have, we
can
don't
be
have
at.
a place to.
That's the point of a plan, is you need to
Yeah, but
think
what
about
happened
this.
is, but just a second, we undergrounded 27 years ago, and now we're being suffered because you didn't do your homework to isolate us from the grid.
I don't know
Well,
that,
PG
I
should.
don't know that it does any good to
Well,
start pointing fingers and saying you didn't do it. The fact is that this is where we're living right now, and we have to help ourselves. Yes, we have to send the message to PG&E.
Well-
Yes, we have to send the message to East Bay Mud. But let's,
Carolyn, there's somebody from East Bay Mud here.
I know, there's 3 people from East
okay,
Bay
so
Mud.
they can answer the question.
Not tonight.
East Bay Mud is not prepared to answer questions tonight because we have just engaged with them, and there's a lot more unanswered questions than there are answers right now. And again, we have future meetings with them planned, and we're going to be working out some details on their contingency plans and how ours will work together.
Who's going to be the contact so that we can talk about our specific area, which is different? Our area is different because we're underground, and we're in a high fire area.
Use the email.
Email.
I have spoken to PG&E.
Howard, just time out, let other people
I'll
talk.
help you with it. There's a question, when will this be likely to happen? Like October, when the winds come up?
Yes. Yeah, so the peak of wildfire season, which is like mid-September to early November, early mid-September to when it starts raining, is when it's most likely to happen. When the wind is strong is when it's most likely to happen.
And you see that happening this year?
I don't forecast the weather.
Assuming the weather, it implies it should be, that'll be our first
Yes, it's
time.
happening now.
Yes, we are ready to flip the switch this year if the conditions were to justify it. But yeah, and it would be sort of that early fall, late summer timeframe. Sorry, you had a question?
I have a few questions related to the fact that some of us here, including me, are liaisons to a homeowners association or neighborhood, and I want to thank you, this is very informative. But I just kind of like some guidance on what I tell my association within the next month.
It's not
One of the things is, are some of your slides on that wildfire site?
Yes.
So I could do a memo to them and say, please look at that?
And they're going to be on our web, a link from our website for YouTube. You can see the whole thing.
Okay, and the other thing, there's several actually. I sense that you're probably going to give us a warning, if you can, within a 24-hour window, that you're likely to have to turn off the electricity.
It was starting 48 hours ago, in advance.
In that case, some people should possibly have a plan that even within that 24 hours, they should take their car out of their garage and be prepared to exit on short notice, right?
Make friends with people in other places.
So-
I happened to be watching TV today when they stopped for a warning that they were evacuating people around Moscow. I thought it was excellent because they did it in multiple languages. They did it visually as well as audibly. They said, close all your windows and doors and, and leave by car if possible, have your pets on leash or in cars. If we're gonna go on vacation anytime in the next 4 months, should we also advise our neighbors that they need to close all their windows? In case this happens when they're not there, is that less likely that a fire will actually come inside their house?
So, just to be clear, the public safety power shutoff is not when a fire is bearing down the hills, right? It is to prevent such a scenario from occurring if we forecast that the risk is super high. So, the closing the windows is not terribly relevant to the public safety power shutoff. That is relevant to if a wildfire is in your area, right? And I'm not the expert on that, I don't know if you want to comment on it, but, so I don't know about the close your windows thing. If you go on vacation, and you're worried about what happens if I'm gone while the public safety power shutoff happens, are there any things in your home that would be highly damaged, fish tank where the fish are gonna die because of public safety power shutoff? That is worth thinking about. But again, public safety power shutoff is, there's no fire yet, and we wanna keep it that way. And that's why we're doing it, right? It's because that fire would be much more damaging than being out of power for 5 days.
And just another comment regarding electrical shutoff. There are gonna be times where we get calls from local fire or Cal Fire, and they immediately want us to shut the power off. It's a safety factor for the firefighters and police officers out there during an actual fire. So we may not give you any notice, and that's a different situation.
That's different.
And we want you just to understand that, right? The difference between the
Okay,
two.
Nick?
I, for one, am happy that PG&E is doing this. It's not exactly wonderful, of course. For some people, it's going to be pretty bad because they're going to have issues, medical issues, et cetera. But I'm happy. In terms of long-term changes, once the poles are improved and the infrastructure is improved, I suppose that based upon how your question was answered, that the severity of the turnoff will probably be reduced, if minimized, or maybe reduced entirely based upon the change in infrastructure. I guess for me, my question is, what can I do as a resident to help PG&E get the resources it needs from all its partners, including us, because we are your customers, to improve your infrastructure so that we can get this done quickly, so that we don't have to suffer every time our electricity is turned off? For me, that's where my mind is right now. What can I do to help? Can contact political officials, contact Tony Early? What can I do? Because I want the neighborhood to be safe. We all want that here in this room. And I think maybe that's what we should be chasing after here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We all want it to be safe, and yes, our goal is to upgrade the infrastructure to minimize the risk of an interaction with our assets that has anything to do with that. So what you can do to help is let your politician know that perspective, right? There are a number of rules being debated at the legislature, at the CPUC, at other regulatory agencies that will have a significant impact in how PG&E operates going forward, right? The CPUC recently passed the public safety power shutoff protocols. So let those folks know, let your representatives, the CPUC, others know your perspective on it and how you feel that this should go in terms of getting PG&E the resources without overburdening ratepayers to make our system as safe as possible. We're already, using all the funds that we have to make it as safe as possible, but appreciate your message there.
So if the cell tower goes down, how do we contact emergency services if we actually see a real fire?
So again, the question was, if the cell tower goes down, what do we do about contacting emergency services?
For a heart attack.
Particularly if we see a fire or anything.
Or a burglar.
Yeah, so most cell towers have a battery that lasts some amount of time. It's not likely to last 2 to 5 days.
Is the only question on that.
Yeah.
Does it last 5 days?
Yeah, so it needs to be part of our plan, right? What is your plan for what's your communication system? Is it to get to an area that has cell phone
Are
service?
you working with the cell tower people?
We are in contact with all the telecoms, both the ones on our lines and the ones with cell towers, and they're making their plans. I don't think it's likely that their plans would have a solution for keeping the whole cell system up for
But
5
the problem
days.
is you're gonna take us out for a wind, and we actually could see a real fire. And so when that happens, we won't be able to contact anyone and tell anyone, because we won't have cell tower service or anything else.
This
So-
isn't in
The cell tower.
anticipation, this is 24 to
Well,
48
that's a
hours
pretty
ahead of
realistic
time.
thing. They're suggesting that in high fire danger times, they're gonna take out our communications when exactly a real fire could occur. It needs to be in the planning before it's implemented. It actually is increasing the danger of the current.
I need to get a plan together, that's right.
If you're in Piedmont Pines neighborhood does have a plan for communication if the power's out. You have those little radios, there's all sorts of other things. I think you need to look at it. This is the same plan you would have if there was an earthquake or another disaster. But I'm gonna tell you honestly, Oakland does core, How many people have taken court? How many people have a plan? Yeah, so you're gonna, good luck. I'm sorry, good luck. No matter, we've had an earthquake, we've had national disasters where people haven't taken that next
That's
step to
right.
make themselves safe and to
They're
help their neighbors be
creating an
safe.
emergency.
And it actually, the public safety meeting next month, we're going to have core. And also, if you come, you can get a safety plan for yourself, you can see what you need to do, whether it's a fire or an earthquake, or unless we all move to Piedmont Pines. You know,
No, you
yes.
can't, we're congested enough.
Not for me, but because I know people in my neighborhood who are elderly, not mobile, relocating is not an option for them. And I don't know if there's still anybody here from the city. Is there anything that the city is going to do to help their population that is
There's
gonna
no
have
plan.
issues?
They're working, talking.
Two-word answer.
Someday
You know, I
you'll have to
cannot
see.
speak for the city.
I asked them.
Can you speak for the city, Nancy?
Okay.
I asked Dan before he left, he said they're talking about it.
You know, we're trying to get the trees trimmed in Oakland. You know, I think it's up to us. We are the first responders for our lives.
But this is a 10-day situation.
Yeah,
We don't know that it's 10 days.
It will be from the
it
modeling.
will be, the
Hold on here a
Chronicle
second,
article
folks.
says it's 5 days.
So, I just want to say something here. At a certain
Please.
point, we all have to take responsibility and self-reliance in taking care of ourselves. These gentlemen here are advising you in advance of something that they're doing to try and prevent a wildfire in your community. That is a proactive measure that benefits all of you. The fire that doesn't happen is a success. Howard, you're a vocal activist for fire prevention. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
But they're not doing it
Hold
without
on.
communication.
Because I haven't thought it through.
So now you've gotten notice by attending this meeting right now. So I'm going to ask all of you, what are you going to do to prepare for the fire?
Move in 100 gallons of gasoline.
It's not a
for the
fire,
generator.
it's
You don't need 100 gallons of gasoline.
Hey, I'm not.
It's high
Okay.
winds we're preparing for, just high winds, that's when this happens, not a fire.
Absolutely. So we don't know if it is or is not going to occur. We don't know when the weather patterns of red flag days are going to happen.
You know they will.
Leslie?
But if they do, yes, it's an inconvenience. The flip side of that coin is they leave the power engaged, a tree comes down across a line and sparks a fire at a property or a parcel that hasn't been properly abated for ground fuels, that leads to ladder fuels, that leads to a canopy fire, and then we deploy every resource we have to try and fight it, which is going on just a couple miles from my house right now in Clayton. And you could have a catastrophic fire event like the 91 Hills fire, like Santa Rosa or Napa or Lake County or
You could've
Yolo
just
or
trimmed
other
that
areas.
tree,
So let's
that
look
didn't
at
fall.
one thing about this entire program. It is intended to prevent a fire and keep your home, your memories, your valuables, everything you've invested in safe. Is it inconvenient? Yes. Are we required to make a sacrifice? Yes. I just checked my address. I live in an area that they're going to shut the power off on. What's my preparation? I got a Honda generator and I already got my house wired that I can plug it in. If you haven't done that, okay, that's an option for you. But please give them a chance to do something proactive that could save your community as opposed to doing nothing that could jeopardize your
But we haven't
community.
talked
Does
about the
everybody
preventative
understand
piece
that?
they could be doing.
Okay?
Trimming the trees so that.
They are. Baby Trees are contractor. They're out there. They're mitigating problems like they haven't done before. 10 years ago, the work that PG&E is doing now did not occur.
Right.
So my point is this. They're telling you advance notice. Prepare now. It is just like an earthquake where you might lose services for not only 2 days, 5 days, 10 days. After Loma Prieta, especially people in San Francisco in the Marina District, didn't have power, water, or any other type of utility for a month. Same with West Oakland.
But that's a once out of 50 years.
So maybe a major firestorm is as well.
Correct. So here's the thing. If you're taking you can't have it both ways. You can't demand that they do something to prevent a fire and then be critical of their measures to prevent a fire.
But we don't have that problem in our neighborhood.
So,
And-
so let me just say,
We don't have a
he's,
tree problem in our neighborhood.
he is served from an underground system, underground distribution system, but it is served from an overhead system that's fed from Claremont Sub. And so, you know, the overhead system, you know, you're not fed directly from a substation on an underground circuit. You're fed from an overhead circuit. And the overhead circuit has the same risks as all the other overhead circuits. And if it's in one of these zone 3 areas, the overhead circuit is going to get shut off. If the overhead circuit is not in a zone 3 area, then it's not going to get shut off, in which case your power is going to last. I think that what Howard was wanting was for you to come to this meeting tonight with a circuit map and be able to show every individual here which circuit serves their home, what the conditions are on that circuit. That's an unreasonable request for tonight's meeting. But I mean, I think it's important to recognize that in a firestorm situation, with winds that were blowing at hurricane strength as they were in Santa Rosa, no amount of tree trimming would have solved that problem. You could trim the tree down to a nub and there was still going to be branches flying through the air. So, you know, to say, oh, you know, PG&E should be out trimming trees once a month is ridiculous, because the wind blows and tree branches fly off, and if there's power lines, the branches can get snagged in the power line and send sparks flying.
That's a great point.
So your point is fantastic, and from a fire prevention perspective, the one thing that could stop the ignition of electrical fire is shutting the power down.
Right.
Which would have made sense and would have prevented potentially the loss of 43 people's lives. So now we have a potentially proactive program to begin and think of, is it inconvenient for you for 2 to 5 days? What's the value of a human life? Because in my book, the inconvenience of 2 to 5 days, and that might not even occur, it's just dependent on the weather conditions, is the sacrifice that I personally would be willing to make so that others may survive and live.
Why didn't we underground all the wires? Why isn't there a plan?
Money.
For that? Well, then why did we
Nancy?
do that instead of spending money
Can I ask
on
a
all of
question?
this?
Wait a second.
Sorry, I've been waiting for 5 minutes now with my hand in the air. It's my turn.
I
I have a request to PG&E, and that is, are you in your team of people that you're working with? Are you also contacting or working with the racist group in Oakland, which is the ham radio operators that are tied into the emergency response system down at headquarters at 17th Street and Martin Luther King? Because in that instance, then we have the possibility of enhanced communications when we have the outage, because we have ham radio operators seated through the hills, and then those of us who are core trained, who use our FRS radios and routinely practice once a month, which my neighborhood does, they